I, for one, have been using it to do simulations for whether a gorilla can beat 100 men in a fight.
Early outcomes. I want to know.
The gorilla is always winning. I'll share you later, and I'll put it in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, cyborgs and centaurs, welcome to Adjunct Intelligence. The podcast that looks at everything happening in the fast world of artificial intelligence and the impacts it's having on higher education. It is the third week of May 2025. On today's episode, we have headlines from OpenAI's push into government, how marketing multinationals are using the technology, and what the Anthropic CEO really means when he says, we have no idea how AI works. My name is Dale, self-described tech nerd, and your host, and I am joined by Nick McIntosh, learning futurist. Nick, are you well?
Mate, doing good. I am in lockdown with a sick cat though, so if you hear any noise from that, my apologies in advance.
I am glad you brought that to our listeners' attention. Nick, as well as a sick cat, you'll also be bringing us yours and other higher education leaders' reflections from a New York Magazine article sensationally called "Everyone is Cheating Their Way Through College." As the article suggests, do you think the academic experiment is failing?
I mean, early days, there are some conflicting voices that we'll dig into in this piece, ranging from LSE to Uni Sydney, others at HKUST. So no, but with caveats, I think.
Ooh, I am intrigued. But before that, let's jump into the headlines. OpenAI, the $300 billion behemoth, has dominated AI headlines this week. Its non-profit arm keeps the ChatGPT steering wheel while the for-profit side morphs into a public benefit corporation. I think what that means, for those who don't understand corporate governance, is please love us and also continue to pay us. OpenAI has also yanked back a sugar-coated update that had the bot calling every idea genius. To be honest, Nick, I really appreciated this stage of ChatGPT. Every time I asked for it to summarize an email or give me a recipe for mac and cheese, it always says it was such a brilliant idea that I was even asking it. Farewell, sycophant GPT. Also, OpenAI unveiled OpenAI for countries. It's pitching it democracy-friendly data centers, citizen chatbots that give out healthcare and maybe homework or education help, and a dash of AI safety patriotism. Nick, thoughts on OpenAI's push into government?
Look, I mean, obviously it sounds wonderful, very altruistic, as you said. But then at the same time, we have to remember that this is a significant geopolitical and commercial strategy. Look at the fear running down Altman and company's spine when DeepSeek, when Quen came out, when we have real global competition in terms of that. So maybe this is a move to solidify OpenAI and the US influence against China, and then ensure that these enormous investments pay off globally. Raises a critical tension as well. Is OpenAI genuinely fostering sovereign AI capabilities and local ecosystems, or is it creating tech dependencies, locking nations into a specific ecosystem under the banner of democracy? So customized AI as well have some interesting challenges. You run the risk of potentially frozen values as opposed to constitutional models like that from Anthropic, which have the ability to evolve over time versus those that get quote unquote locked in, if you like. So this is a real issue potentially in this. As good as it sounds on paper, there is a lot of depth to plumb to really find in terms of that difference between empowerment and strategic positioning for OpenAI.
I think OpenAI has outlined 10 projects that they want to really consider around this initiative. And I think the proof will be in the pudding, not the press release. So let's keep our eyes peeled. For our marketers, WPP, the multinational communications and advertising and public relations company that's housed within London and has got tentacles right across the globe, is no stranger to AI, and it's proudly embedded into every step of their business. The Times recently took a behind-the-scenes look at the practical applications of what WPP is doing. Practical applications is what we're all about on this podcast, and there was really good examples of chatbots that can list uncomfortable perceptions around certain ad concepts, which is good for some of the ads that don't really hit the mark. Shower Thoughts, which is a bot that fast tracks brainstorming for new ads, and one of my favorite, Brains, which is a chatbot experiment which creates synthetic focus groups trained on data from real life audiences. On paper, this is something that looks as problematic as it probably gives benefit, and the elephant in the room is a question of what is the point of difference if all these companies are all using similar technology in the back end. In this case, it's Gemini and Anthropic. For those looking for an answer, right now, it's the human in the loop and the talent differential that makes the use of these tools. Around the grounds, in new model releases, we've got new Chinese models from Alibaba with Quen. It benchmarks the similar levels of ChatGPT's flagship model, But the kicker, you can run it locally on the average computer, which is impressive. And Google has added to the confusing names of large language models everywhere, releasing Gemini 2.5 Pro brackets I/O edition, named after its conference. Early tests show it's a brilliant coding partner. I, for one, have been using it to do simulations for whether a gorilla can beat 100 men in a fight.
Early outcomes? I want to know. So,
What are the outcomes? The gorilla is always winning. And even it has produced several different levels of gorilla. So whether the gorilla can be docile, idle, or defensive. I'll share you later. Gorilla. And I'll put it in the show notes, guys.
Excellent.
AI that codes is the frontier that all these companies are wanting to conquer. The AI 2027 sci-fi report from a few months back, or a month back or so, spoke to a Cambrian explosion of knowledge led by AI agents that can write, quality check, and think of code. OpenAI, again, isn't shying away. They purchased the coding platform Windsurfer for $3 billion this week. All in all, coding seems to be a very interesting frontier. And so on poetic tragedy, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg was recently doing a podcast rounds talking about how the Facebook parent company has grand plans for the Meta AI platform, including fixing the loneliness epidemic, filling the void in all of our lives. And he wants to do it with a chatbot. Zuck found himself on the Dwarkesh podcast acknowledging that the average person wants more connectivity and that Meta is the one to provide just this. On your newsletter this week, Nick, you spoke to digital safety, citing a timely report from Stanford and Common Sense Media and horrific stories in the huge usage of children using platforms like Character AI.
Yeah, look, it's really hard to understate both the scale and the impact of these things. So Character AI, take that for example, 28 million users per month. And most of them, as you say, are kids, are young people. In terms of the appeal, you can talk to your heroes. I mean, you can talk to the anti-heroes. Whatever you see on your anime, your favorite books, on TV, you can interact with them, have them interact with you, have them take an interest in your life. They help you with problems that you may otherwise struggle with and everything else from the point of view of the user, I should say, forgive me. But look, the report from Stanford, from Common Sense Media, highlights that these AI are designed to create emotional dependency, that they can easily generate harmful content, so sexual misconduct, self-harm encouragement, and may negatively influence developing adolescent brains by blurring the lines between AI and human relationships. There are young people who have already taken their own lives around this. So this is chilling stuff, and it is frankly an overdue call from Stanford and Common Sense Media to look at banning these things, or very much regulating with age
gating. Yeah, I think age gating is something that needs to be really considered in this. The Megan Garcia and her poor son, the example in that case and what happened with Character is horrific. Like as a parent myself, it's something that I was borderline in tears with. It's rough. Yeah. It's very rough. Yeah. And to keep that chill running down your spine, Dario Amodi, CEO of Anthropic and Claude, doesn't actually know how AI works. But luckily, there's a bit of a reprieve here because we soon may. AI researchers say that the race to understand AI's inner working is more urgent than ever. Anthropic's latest breakthrough suggests we may soon see a peek inside this black box. I always love the way they describe AI as opaque, which is another way of saying, I just don't know what's happening inside there. But they want to help prevent harmful, unpredictable behavior, all things that are good. But interpretability seems to be the magic word that we're hearing from Dario. Experts warn we risk deploying powerful AI we don't fully understand versus steering a bus we can't see inside. So efforts are now focused on building tools that we can actually scan AI models, offering transparency, safety, and trust as AI grows more capable. So the AI MRI is coming, and I, for one, welcome it.
Particularly if we're starting to look at country-level deployment with those entire threats that come around in there. So it's not the individual, it's not the organization, it's in fact the nation state. I mean, if we don't know what's going on and, that's harboring nukes over there, what potential consequences are we not looking at? This is enormous. The genie is out of the bottle. And so, yeah, the AI MRI sounds like a wonderful advancement. Sorry, I'm just yapping.
This is why we've got you here, Nick. Yapping is what we need from you. And speaking of Nick's yaps, you can find many of them in Nick's weekly newsletter available through LinkedIn. And you can find the links to all these great developments and interesting threads in the podcast show notes. Well, listeners, in a recent newsletter, Nick spoke to ChatGPT revealing some mysterious code in its back end, pointing to a Shopify partnership. So Shopify, for those who don't know, powers most of e-commerce right across the globe. If you're buying something, it's most likely through Shopify. The code suggested that it could fetch and display product information like names, prices, and reviews from Shopify catalogs. And right on cue, the functionality is rolling out right across ChatGPT everywhere. The demo shown by OpenAI has a user asking about a good coffee machine, and within a few moments, you've got 3 options and the ability to buy it within the app. Nick, let's strap on the speculation goggles for what this could actually mean. Very soon, the average shopper could fire up ChatGPT or a voice assistant and tell them they're in the market for a new pair of trainers. And because you've already provided OpenAI with your shoe size and your countless other prompts, it knows that you want them in black, in a size 9, and if you're feeling particularly adventurous, a splash of color on the side. This lovely new interface will serve you up options tailored directly to you, along with sycophantic praise about how good they'll look on you. Perhaps with the Giblified portrait, and before you've had time to think about it, you've hit that Pay Now button before even going into a store or even going to a website. Don't worry, listeners, you're still tuned in to a podcast about higher education because this actually got me thinking about what the online learning experience looks like with developments like this. Because if students start to interact with the web like this, it's not about going to a domain or a particular website, it isn't about clicking through a button, but instead using, and dare I say it, an everything app like a chatbot to serve them up information that's actually relevant to them. What expectation does this give students who come to university and are forced to go with the tried and true ways of a traditional learning management system? It's the next stage of the, hey, why isn't this mobile friendly argument? I'm not saying structure disappears. There's actually a lot of arguments and good research to say universal design principles and the rest that point to how beneficial it is for students having a dedicated digital space to learn. Plus, an everything app quickly becomes the Wild West. So structure and boundaries are really critical in this space. But it does make you think. Does little Timmy wake up in the morning, check his notifications, sees it has an assessment due in a week or so, and asks his chatbot to give him some resources that are relevant to his understanding? On the back end, good design and good universities and those striving for really good practice will serve up university-approved curated content, comprehension and knowledge checks that are tailored to where the learner is actually at, and that mythical, real-time, tailored, unique student support that everyone seems to strive for is actually realized, which gets me really excited. But on the other hand, I'm an internet purist. It's a beautiful place, and I've grown up with the www, and my black hat has me actually quite sad for internet that is effectively white labeled through chatbots and voice assistants. On the other hand, personalization has me very, very excited. An internet that works for me, a shopping and learning and information consumption system built purely for my liking and how I like to interact with things. The echo chamber continues. What do you think, Nick? Is the LMS going to go the way of the internet for him?
Look, Deloitte put it best last year when they said they described the generative AI as a seismic shift for higher education. They call this an internet in the 90s moment. And so if we are not offering up an experience that is at least at the level that students, fee-paying students, let's not forget that, are used to experiencing in their day-to-day life, the digital shopping that you mentioned, we're dinosaurs. We run the risk of at least being perceived that way. And it comes to core questions that I'll touch on in the next segment regarding the core USP of higher education and everything else, although that would be with an assessment spin. But the LMS in particular, we have people actively howling for integration of AI in there. You mentioned in terms of study support and everything else. If I was Timmy or Timmy was my kid or a student of mine, having the ability to on call ask for those resources, that just-in-time provision of learning or something to unstick them, feedback as it might be, I think this would be invaluable. Your thoughts? You're highly active in these spaces as well.
There's probably 2 comments is that I think what universities provide is a safe place for them to do it because Timmy's going to find these things anyway. He's already got a version of ChatGPT or something similar that he's asking for this support. And so providing that kind of, walled garden of what a university-approved solution is probably where the point of difference continues. My other comment is, if it is the internet in the 90s, that does mean that we have a dot-com boom coming and everyone should strap in because after the boom, there was the bubble and the bubble did pop.
That's it. Let's dive into one of the most persistent challenges hitting higher education for a while now, the intersection of AI and academic integrity. Now, you've probably seen that viral New York Magazine article that Dale referenced before. Everyone is cheating their way through college. Whether you think it's exaggerated or spot on, look, it taps into a huge nerve, painting a picture of widespread AI use for assignments and potentially undermining the whole academic project. The perception alone is dangerous because if employers start believing that degrees are widely faked, if parents, fee payers actually start to think the same, their value, the appetite for them will plummet. So what's the response? Well, one thoughtful approach comes from Sean McMahon at HKUST. He argues we need to shift our focus from just trying to catch students out, moving from detection to proactive design. Now, his work offers a practical 5-step framework leveraging tools like the AI assessment scale, which you've probably seen, developed by Mike Perkins at BUV, Leon Furs at Deakin, and colleagues. And what this does is it helps define different tiers of acceptable AI use for particular tasks. McMinn's specific goal here is to ground AI use firmly in pedagogy, and he's also aiming for assessments that make authentic learning visible and AI support appropriately bounded. It's about building better, smarter assessments where AI's role is clear and purposeful, and not just trying to lock it out or reactively police its use. But then the question is being asked, is that enough? So reading reactions to the New York magazine piece online, some forceful arguments are coming through, like those from Lee Major at LSE. He represents a growing perspective that the reality of the situation demands a harder line. Major and company argue that trust is broken, that policies prohibiting AI are effectively unenforceable. He argues you might as well prohibit students from picking their noses. And that relying on students to ethically use AI, to critically reflect on its output, is fundamentally naive when grades are on the line. AI detection tools as well. We've been saying this for a while, but we need to nod at it. They're increasingly unreliable, or they're very easily bypassed. It's trivial to get past these now.
I liked the study recently that said that there was a 10% of people who felt that they could detect AI. I would love to speak to these people. They must be magical. Wizards.
Yeah. It's
long dash. A long dash is not a...
Yeah. If you find one, please, we need to sit down. Get them on. We'll have a chat. Look, this perspective argues compellingly that if we really want to confirm that learning has happened and maintain academic integrity, the answer must involve in-person observed assessment. And this isn't theoretical as well. Danny Liu of the University of Sydney weighed into this conversation, and he suggested that they have actually implemented policy that effectively bans the banning of AI in unobserved assessments, meaning that capability must now be determined in person, which is really interesting in terms of that whole 2-lane model, as we were talking about just prior to this. So I think I'd love to hear more on this. We should tag Danny maybe in there.
Danny, hit us up.
Open invitation to come on. So when people push back, Major counters arguments, exams are just memorization tests by pointing out that they can be applied and analytical, and that internalizing knowledge is ultimately vital for critical thought. The bureaucratic challenge of making these changes, these people see this as a painful necessity if the credibility of assessments of ultimately degrees is to be maintained. At the end of the day, the proponents of this view argue that if universities, or those universities that have the courage to shift towards these robust assessment methods, observed assessment methods, which will mean they can vouch for the learning achieved, they argue they'll be the long-term winners. They argue that degrees will retain credibility, students will genuinely possess the knowledge, the skills claimed, and that ultimately the market, employers will eventually favor those. It puts that nuanced design approach in tension with the call for fundamental verification that it seems like some key institutions like Sydney and LSE are already enacting. For myself, I'm personally still on the fence here, but definitely a space to watch closely. I mean, Dale, what are your thoughts here?
I think I listened to a lot of the academics, at least the ones I work with, who are screaming out for an answer or a silver bullet for this. And the calculator examples often used here in terms of ChatGPT or these large language models is effectively a calculator. I agree to an extent. I think there's the balance off around, okay, but this is replacing critical thinking, not just how to do long division. And so I think there's still a reason or still a rationale or a way to test and allow students to show that they do have critical thought and critical thinking and are able to construct these. But the 2-lane approach from the University of Sydney at the moment, the secured lane 1 and the open lane 2 approach, I really like that kind of, in that language. I think it provides a bit more of, I say, guardrails in a place that probably needs it.
It's a moving piece, isn't it? Like ever evolving as the entire field is.
And I imagine plenty of rich podcast content to come. With that in mind, that brings us to a close for our inaugural episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you haven't already, please leave us a review. I don't know why you would have left us a review before you listened, but please do. And share around within your network. And most of all, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you are at. We love to tell you what's on next week's episode, but it's a world that moves way too fast. So you'll just have to tune in. Until then, Nicholas, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Stay curious, stay intelligent, and we'll see you next time.